Hello guys, welcome to another video. In this video we're gonna review
Nikon D80.
here is how it looks like, and I am having the 18 to 70 mm DX lens on this, and we're gonna check out the sample images and go through the features of this camera, and then we try to figure out whether you should still be using this camera in 2021. If you can get decent results that would be still relevant with this camera in 2021 or not. Let's begin the video guys. So here is how the camera looks like. The build quality is pretty solid and it has so many tiles just like the D90 and the D7000, so it is actually a fully professional camera, and it does have the ability to autofocus the older Nikon lenses, the D series lenses that doesn't have the autofocus motor built into the lenses, because this one has a focus motor built in the camera, so it can drive those kind of lenses. And compared to D3000 series cameras, 5000 series cameras, this one will be able to autofocus all those lenses, so that's a really good thing about this camera. Now let's talk about the technical specification of this camera. So this one is a 10 megapixel sensor camera, and this is actually a CCD sensor, so it's not a CMOS sensor. So this was the last camera that had the CCD sensor, because after this when D90 came, so that one started having the CMOS sensor, and it's a 10 megapixel, and 10 megapixels are not too much and not too less either, so you can still get decent results with 10 megapixel, provided if you can control the lighting situation. And the ISO range for this camera goes from 100 up to 1600, and you can boost it up to 3200 with the high 1, high 2 and high 3 options. So like even between like two ISOs, so you can actually increment the ISO in like 1/3 stops. And beside that, this can shoot up to 3 frames per second. So in a second, when you hold down the shutter button, you can have like 3 photos taken every second. And it has this exposure bracketing in it as well. It has a flash as well, and yeah, the rest of the features are like pretty standard, like there is nothing too much to talk about it. And the dynamic range for this camera is around 11.2, which is not bad, like considering that it is a really old sensor. And yeah, this was actually launched in 2006 November, so it's almost 15-year-old. Not in November, in September 2006 September, and the weight of this camera is around 660 grams. So if you include the battery and those kind of things, so it would be more than 700 grams. It's a pretty solid camera, and it's 15-year-old camera, and for a 15-year-old camera to be still working and be taking decent photos in 2021, so it's a great achievement. Now while I'm talking in this video, I would be putting the photos that I've taken with this camera on the screen, so you can listen to me talking as well, and you can also check out the photos that I took with this camera. Most of the photos I took were actually with this. In fact, all the photos were with this 18 to 70 mm kit lens, so this would be a review for this lens as well, along with this camera. Even though it's not fair, maybe I should have used this lens on a newer body to get a better result, but still let's see how the results is gonna be like. And compared to a kit lens, this lens is actually slightly more professional, because when it is at 70 mm, the aperture goes to 4.5, so you get more light and you can get much more background blur compared to kit lens, because the kit lens at 55 mm it's 5.6 aperture, and at 18 mm they both are 3.5, so not much difference there. But in terms of image quality and build quality, this is actually a more professional lens compared to the 1855 mm kit lens. Anyways guys, now let's talk about the good things about this camera. The first good thing is the price. In 2021 you can get this camera for maybe 60 US dollar or 70 US dollar or 75 US dollar, depending on the lens that you have along with the camera. If you just talk about the body of the camera alone, you can get the body alone for around 50 US dollar, which is a really good price, because it's better to buy this camera like compared to like D3000 or 3100, because This one can still use the older Nikon lenses which doesn't have the autofocus motor inside them, like the D series lenses. So that's a great choice. Like if you don't have the budget and you still want to get into DSLR photography and learn the photography, you can get this one and get some cheap older Nikon prime lenses and zoom lenses, because the newer ones are more expensive compared to them. And the second good thing about this camera is the image quality is pretty nice actually. Like even though like if you are shooting at high ISO there is noise, but the quality of the noise is much different compared to like the kind of noise that we get in the newer camera. I don't know if it is because it's a CCD sensor, but there is something to that, even at when I shoot at the maximum ISO of 1600 or even 3200, the images looks quite nice actually. They don't even though they are grainy, but they don't look that bad actually. And the third good thing about this camera is that it has so many dials and buttons. So if you look at this camera, we have a dial in the front as well, so you can adjust the aperture using it. And if you are holding down all these buttons, you can press them and change the settings using this dial. And then at the back we have the standard dial, which you can use for changing the settings and also for adjusting the shutter speed as well. And you have dedicated dial for everything, like the image quality, ISO, and this is for like the white balance, and this one is for like moving around the focus point, and this is for locking the focus point as well. And then on the top we have like a dial for the changing the different autofocus modes, and for choosing between like the different shooting mode, if you want like a continuous mode or a single shooting mode, if you want to put it on self timer. And also we have a top LCD, so you don't have to be all the time looking at the back LCD to figure out the setting. So you can just hold down the button and then change the setting, and you can see it on the fly on the top LCD. And you can also see the shutter speed, ISO, and the other different settings in here. So that's a really good thing about this camera, because all the buttons are in here, very easy to change. It is actually a professional camera, because when it was launched back in 2006, this was a really expensive camera that was used by the professional. And another good thing about this camera is when you are actually changing the ISO, so you can increment it in like 1/3 stops. So unlike like some of the Canon cameras where your ISO starts from 100 and from 100 it jumps to 400 and then 800, in this one you can like have 100, 150, 160, and those kind of like 1/3 increment. So if you have the available light, you don't need to be like shooting at a higher ISO. And another good thing about this camera is like it does have this exposure bracketing as well inside it. So if you are you want to shoot SDR image, so you can take multiple exposure shots, and then later on in the Lightroom you can merge them and make a nice SDR image. And beside that it has a flash, so that always helps. And pretty solid body, and yeah, not it's a nice camera, I would say. I really like this camera, even though it's old. But yeah, now since it is old, like 15-year-old, of course it has limitations. It can't be compared with the cameras that we are having in 2021. Like we have the latest mirrorless cameras, which are like so awesome in terms of like autofocus, even though the autofocus on this camera is still really good for photography, because this camera can only do photography, it cannot shoot video. So that is like one con for this camera, like compared to D90, which was successor to this one. So that was the first DSLR, D90, that can shoot video. But back in 2006 there were no DSLR that would shoot video. So yeah, not much to say about that. And another bad thing about this camera is that it doesn't feature any live view. So that's a big miss, because if you are using some manual focus lenses, the live view helps, because then you can see on the LCD screen, you can zoom the image a lot, and then you can pull your focus ring and adjust the focus until you see everything is really sharp. So using the manual focus lenses on this camera is really very difficult. So I would advise you to just use the the lenses with autofocus, like the D lenses or the G lenses of Nikon on this camera. Don't use the manual focus one on this camera. So another bad part about this camera is the ISO capability. So of course the ISO range goes from 100 to 1600, and yeah, you can boost it up to 3200. But when you have like a really dim lighting situation, like you are shooting indoors and you don't have enough lights, like you don't have those kind of softbox or decent lighting condition, then this camera struggles a lot. Like you won't be getting a decent shutter speed. Like if it's really dark, so most of the time you will be shooting at 1/8 of a second or 1/10 of a second, and at that shutter speed there is a very high chance that there would be camera shake, and the photo would have photo won't be sharp, and it would be a little bit blurred due to the vibration of the camera. So that's one con about this camera. But yeah, of course, if you use a prime lens, then you get like more light, then you can shoot at a slightly higher shutter speed, or you can add like extra light if you are shooting indoor. And if you have to shoot outside, then try to use it in the daylight, or if it is the evening time just before the sun sets, you can take some decent image. But once it is like quite dark, the sun has gone down, then this camera is not that good. In that case, you would have to maybe use external flash on top of the camera, and then bounce the light, or use some kind of a diffuser to get a sharp image. So there are workarounds for that, but it's certainly not the best camera when it comes to low light capabilities, guys. Okay, now the final verdict, whether you should get this camera in 2021. I would say if you are just starting photography, and if it is just a hobby, like you like to take photos of your friends and your own photos, or like some family or small functions photos, then you can definitely go for this camera, because with this camera you get the ability to use the D lenses with the built-in the one that doesn't have the built-in autofocus motor inside them. So all those lenses gonna autofocus on this camera. By the way, like we have this autofocus manual focus switch on this camera, so if you flip in and out between this, so you can switch from manual focus to autofocus. So that is a really good ability, because if you buy a D 3000 or 3100, so 3100 can record videos as well, but that cannot use the older Nikon lenses. But compared to D3000, this is definitely better, because it can use all the older Nikon lenses as well. And if you just want to do photography, because this camera doesn't record any kind of video whatsoever, then definitely you can consider this camera, because you can get this really cheaply with the kit lens for around 60 to 70 US dollar. And if you spend like another 20-30 US dollar, you can get some couple of or maybe at least one prime lens. You can get, I think, 50 mm f1.8D lens you can get for maybe like another 50 US dollar. So in like 110 or 120 US dollar, you have this nice camera with kit lens and one prime lens. So then you can start shooting some really nice portrait photos with that lens, and the photo is gonna look really quite professional. But yeah, but if you are a professional, you are making a living out of photography, then I think this camera is not for you. You should go for something better, more latest, because in terms of technology this is quite old. So in that case, you can go for maybe the latest mirrorless cameras from Nikon, or some full frame cameras from Nikon, or maybe D5500 or D7200. Those kind of camera, they would be much better for you. Okay guys, I hope you liked the videos. If you have any questions about this camera, you can actually reach out to me on Instagram. I have the ID at the bottom of this video in the same frame, and you can post me a question directly over there. I always reply, or you can post your question in the comment box here as well. And please do subscribe to the channel, because I need your support to grow, and press the like button and the bell icon in case I upload new video. You would be getting notified. I'll see you in the next video, guys.